This is the meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee. It's a meeting of the whole. Let's go around Jennifer and flip the record. Amy, we'll start with you and work our way around.
Amy DeBosky.
Dick Drain.
Forrest Dunbar.
Littleton. Crop.
Mike Chadwick, Control Audit.
Team Gates.
Shirley Nelson, Budget Advisory Commission.
Suzanne LaFrance.
Felix Rivera.
Pete Peterson.
Welcome to the meeting. We'll follow the agenda on here. Mr. Harris isn't here. Are you here? Not here representing Robert Harris. No. We'll see who shows up. How about Lance Wilbur? I have to see him. Okay, you're next on the list, ma'am.
Is there a place you prefer me to be?
Someplace you feel comfortable. That's inside the room. I told that to people who are known to they run outside and comfortable there.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Bonzoff. I am Deputy Director of O&B. I'm here for Lance Wilbur. The budget items I'd like to go over or mention are chronological, starting with 2016 status. On the meeting of May 23rd, there are three assembly documents that are up for public hearing related to 2016. The first one is aligning the budget with the actual spend for the municipal attorney department, where they overspent due to excess leave cash out in excess of expectation. And also, the meeting manager's department was above budget due to unforeseen catastrophic claim. So that document you'll see come across is up for public hearing on the 23rd. Additionally, there are two other 2016 documents that are on the May 23rd agenda, and they're just aligning the operating and capital budgets for Merrill Field and Court. Thank you. And court. And that alignment between operating and capital is due to determinations from the controller division that the expenditures were more appropriately categorized as operating and not capital. So it's just a movement of the expenditures and that budget from the operating fund to the capital fund, the court, and now field. So those are the three documents up for public hearing on the 23rd. And hope, and still with 2016, to my knowledge, the books are not closed yet. So these are related to unaudited financials, but I'm hopeful that there will be no more postings against 16, but no, still unaudited. So that's it for 2016. 2017, we just finalized as a city the revised budget. We have now all the information compiled that will show the results of the revised budget changes, and we have it in a document that's available online at the OMB's internet site. We can also print for you hard copies. What this document has is just a compact version of the revised budget the meat of the revised budget. A couple things I'd like to show you or just mention that are in here. We have a lot of the schedules that are in here are the same schedules that you may see in our approved budget, but of course updated with revised budget numbers. I think in the introduction of the new assembly members, one of the things that was discussed was how the departments may have multiple funds within them. And one thing I didn't mention is we do have a chart in our publications of approved and revised documents that show the budget, the departments, and then the funds, and we're in that budget amount by fund for each department.
If you need copies of it, we'll available to all of us.
I would gladly.
If we do that, I appreciate it. So
Okay.
everybody's got a copy.
Okay, we'll do, and I would, yeah, we'll do. In addition to this publication, We've got the mill rates by district, the build of them, so you can see your tax districts, and then the funds, the mill rate for the funds that go into those tax districts, so you can see how we landed with the mill rates. Also, maps from GIS. The GIS folks, I'm sure, you guys have been maybe working with them for the marijuana stuff, but they gave us some updated maps that are current for the tax districts. Another component of our budget book that we have is kind of a blow up of a couple of select service areas, the Chudiak service area, the Eagle River Parks and Rec and Girdwood. We included these documents in our budget book after a request from an assembly member. And so the point of that is that if there's anything in here in our publication that you want more information on or would have a recommendation that we include, please let us know because we'll gladly make that change. The purpose of these documents, of course, is public communication of what we're doing as a city. So we're very open to those changes or recommendations. Also, if any of you ever want a walkthrough of any of these documents, any of these schedules that we include in our documents, our publications, I will hopefully speak for Lance, that we will gladly walk you through any of them if you want that. I know we had a very brief update.
Presentation.
Yeah, there's just so much information that if you folks want to do one-on-one or another longer one, we would gladly walk through that. So that's the 17 revised budget doc that put forth the tax levy information. Additionally, on the May 9th meeting, the bonds were passed and they've been voted and I think ready for the departments to work on them. So the bonds that were approved by the voters have been appropriated and passed. So that's it for 17. And now OMB is going to start the process of developing the 2018 budget.
Is that everything out?
Yes, thank you, sir.
John, sir?
So, can I go through those budget documents some way, find out how a grant from the federal government is received and how it's being spent?
No. Well, actually, I should, it's never no or yes, right? It depends. Typically, grants are not, so this is all our publications, these two publications I mentioned are specific to our operating budgets. And typically, grants that we get from anybody, federal, state, or non-federal state, are separate. They're not included in our operating budget. And so, pardon me?
But there is some documentation somewhere as to where it came from, where it went.
And if he told you the name of it,
Absolutely.
you can tell me exactly where the money's spent.
Absolutely. We have a very thorough process where we, from application, award, appropriation, and reporting. So if you have a specific grant you're interested in knowing the status of, we can find that for you.
If we get a grant from the U.S. Forest Service, I'd like to know how much, where it came from,
Okay?
and if there's any record.
Okay.
No, thank you.
Lori? Eric? Yes. Tim?
No, just a comment. I'm always concerned when I look through the agenda in terms of the changes we're making to the budgets, doing various things, and especially this time around, I looked at what we have coming and where we're moving funds from budget operating money to capital expenditures, and that always worries me a little bit. Are we doing something shady in terms of not highlighting capital expenditures and I'm sure that that's not the case. That was basically just regular use of those funds to shift from operating to government. You know, I'm always worried that we're not following the capital expenditures and government or all those things. They were authorized expenditures, and just the funds went down.
Ma'am, anything?
So we do go through, you know, the finance department, in regards to the two documents.
Yeah.
I've seen the finance department, you know, it's gone through their evaluation and their determination, especially in light of potential audit findings. That is why that would be so, and as far as going forward, other documents, I feel that in the finance department's budget, we have that same concern, or we don't want those things to go through us either. We have a concern and we do.
Make the decisions appropriately in terms of, and not just shift funds.
Absolutely.
Is that all?
Sorry.
Mr. Bowski, ma'am?
Marilyn, what is a typical time frame, and when do you anticipate 2016 is actually going to be closed? Because we've had first quarter budget revisions now, and I'm hearing, well, we have, you know, leave cashes, now we're having to deal with, I mean, it seems to me like 2016 is like the year that will never close. I mean, when are we, I mean, I'm surprised with me every time I turn around and I hear about new budget for 2016.
I would expect by now, most of the postings for 16 have stopped, the actual movement. I know, all of that occurs through the controller division, and OMB doesn't have a part of it, but we see the end result. But from my communications with them, I don't expect any other postings, but I can't guarantee. I can ask them for their estimate of when they expect the CAFR to be done, if they haven't done an anticipation of any other postings. That'd be lovely. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Mr. Peterson, sir.
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Rivera, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No questions.
Mr. France.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question actually for Marilyn in regards to the operating and capital budgets. Is there any information available as to guidance and practices that the finance department follows when making those sorts of decisions? I'm just looking for more information as to understanding the process.
Yes, I'm sorry, I wasn't, do I say?
I couldn't answer
Chair,
your
when I
question
respond?
for you.
Yeah, what would you, I'm sorry, I'm not, Robert, okay.
Marilyn's
So,
fine.
Yes.
Take your time.
Sorry. So absolutely, the controller division, they adhere to, speak government accounting standards, yes, rulings, and they'll typically be able to cite to you the GASB X number that they will refer to that they use to make the determinations. So yes. And in addition to that, where there are concerns of the interpretation of those rules, both the folks in the finance department and I know OMB, we will consult with our auditors if there's questions about what's happening. So we do take that seriously, and there's outside rules and things that we follow to do what we do.
Who's Gadsby on now? 60-something?
I don't know, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So Marilyn, I don't have the documents in front of me, so I apologize. This might not be directly germane to your presentation today, but I continue hearing, and there's been news reports about marijuana revenue coming in less than expected. So I'm wondering if you know what our projected revenue was for this year, when that projection was made, and will there be any revised projection? Is there some delta between what we were hoping for and what we're actually getting?
Yes. Our budget is currently $43 million, and expenditures, I didn't see where we're at. I can send that to you. where the postings through what date. I can send that to you. The Treasury Department Division does do a projection and a presentation of revenue budget to actuals. They should be starting those either with May close or June close. And so those are the folks we rely on to give us that projection of where we expect to land by year end. So I do not have that information at this time.
So you think we'll have significantly more information after the May close or June close?
Yes.
Could we have that be included in the next budget meeting, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
And talk about that, once we get that information, because, like I say, I'm nervous. I think we're going to come in significantly under where we think we're going to come in.
Yeah.
Marilyn, we can make sure that's brought to the next time we have this committee meeting. We appreciate it. Actuals versus projected.
Don't we get those in a regular assembly package?
We do, but it'd be nice for us here to just get marijuana. If we built a escalator into the marijuana taxation, we created every 2 years, allows us to raise the tax a little bit on marijuana. We wouldn't want to do that if in fact there's an impact on the services we're providing. We just need to know the amount of money coming in. Don't appear to be of the Christian Assembly members. Moving down the agenda, Shirley Nelson, item 5, ma'am. Open the meeting, Chair. We have our Budget Advisory Commission.
Thank you. I see that you had a presentation by Mark Johnson from ML&P. We had requested he attend our last meeting, and he did, and he had put together this wonderful PowerPoint. So I was going to review it, but it seems like he's already been here. So, it was a very good presentation, a lot of information, and necessary, I think, that we should look at. Also, two things that the commission is working on for this next meeting will be a fuel tax. We're just going to possibly meet with Dan Moore and Bill Policy to see where that even can fall into the municipality. I know it's been a topic of discussion with the assembly, so we thought we would just at least get some information on that topic. And then another topic that has come up, and we had actually put together a resolution. We are not presenting that. It's about privatizing EMS. So we would like to approach it, a study. We would like to do a study similar to the property tax exemption that we presented to you 2 years ago on privatizing the EMT services, or at least complementing them. So it would be supplementing Anchorage Fire Department EMS operations with private sector EMT paramedic providers. So it's a study, and we will be talking about that at our next budget meeting and possibly voting on it if we want to do a subcommittee to study it and then get the data over the next year, say, and present it to the assembly. I think it's very important just because we've seen the budget explode in that department. I know it's a concern and so on. So I think it's worth looking into, or we do, and like that. So that was about, I think that's pretty much on our agenda.
Okay. Can you take some questions from Assembly members? Matt, Shirley, would you take some questions?
Oh, yes.
Assembly members?
Sure.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Pete, do you want to talk to Shirley about the sprinkler tax, where that is at right now, the exemption coming out of Juneau?
Actually, I didn't see whether the Senate concurred with that yesterday or not. So
House approved it, didn't they?
House approved it. I don't know whether the Senate concurred or not, and I don't know whether the governor included it on the special session, but I doubt that he did.
Just it was something that came out of your committee, so I wanted to know.
Correct. All right, because that came into $600,000 savings if we could get that exemption.
When you're going through a field tax, take a look at if you want to dedicate the funds to it. Unlike Juneau, we can dedicate the funds to it. So it would be useful for this body if, tell us where you'd like the money to go if we do in fact look at your recommendation for a field tax. Where would you want that to be spent?
Okay. So
And what level?
Okay.
Yes, John.
A couple of things, if you're brought up on the fuel tax, we have a citywide crisis right PAC probably qualifies, so keep that in mind. Now, and the EMT thing is, I mean, I think it is interesting. Bond failed and brought up a lot of issues people had, and we see this over time. So I'd like to have it looked at, but if you're only looking at what we're doing now and privatizing, and they're all a part of it, there's some other options there too, and maybe looking at what is the scheduling. Is it something to do with the scheduling that causes the overtime? Or is our staffing level adequate or too high? But I'd be interested in a little bit broader than just kind of narrowing it down to perhaps one solution. There may be some others in there that can help out with the whole operation.
Correct.
That puts a lot on your plate, but, you know, it's a bigger issue than just should it be privatized or not.
And we have been reaching out to, and I know the gentleman that attended our last budget meeting has had experience in the EMT world, and I did forward some of the information to him. So I think at this point, what we would like to do is just to study it, you know, and I think we've had the fire chief at this last meeting where Mark Johnson was too, so we wanted more time talking about their hurdles and issues, and of course we knew about that overtime that they had to approach the assembly for 1.5 million, and a part of it was the scheduling problem and having so many on an engine and the issue of an engineer on each individual truck. So there's a lot of things to go into the study that you know, have been written in code, I guess, for lack of a better word, but sometimes that can get changed too. And I think in the past administrations that has happened where the changes have been made to probably better fit what the needs are, because it is a very expensive thing. And we're not taking away from the safety at all by any means. That's not one of our issues, and we're not approaching that. It's just, I think, an educational report on what is happening now, what are other communities doing it that would be like kind to the city of Anchorage, and so on. So we'll put together maybe 4 members of the BAC that will study it over the next several months. And any questions that you have that you would like us to look at, please let us know.
Allison? Yes, sir, Mr. Steele.
Yeah, on that particular topic, there are some private providers. Loomis, I think, is one, and maybe some others out there. The trouble was that we were having to staff for emergency response and then fill out with the specialties, and so there's a lot of staff downtime in regular functions. But then when you get something like the epidemic that we had with spice, it peaks out, and then we start staffing higher. And the question is, are we past that, and can we go back down and whatever? So there's all kinds of questions in that regard, and I'm glad you're looking into it, because we ought to have more than just full staffing in our department. It may be that we can augment with something private. The chief, when he spoke to us too, was giving us the percentages on how much our emergency calls versus fire calls. It's pretty top heavy on the emergency calls, and that's an issue. And now, of course, you're hearing in the news the heroin epidemic, and of course they're being the first responders too with the Narcan and so on. So it's challenging, but I think I'm not sure you could quote me on this, but I want to say it was like 90, well in the high 90% emergency calls, which is good that we don't have that many fires, you know, and stuff. So we look at it that way, that a lot of the services are going towards the emergency, just like you said. And it may be more training, might be get more of our firefighters upgraded to EMT status. I think most of them are.
They all are.
Have to be required.
So much better.
Well, I think one of the issues that has come up, and the chief did talk to us as well as one of the committee meetings when I was in here not long ago about the staffing too. When you have 4 men on a truck, that has been a very expensive transition, and they have to have a full-time engineer on 24-hour pay, not on call. He's on call, but he's on payroll and stuff, because you got to have an engineer per truck and so on. So there's a lot of issues that play into it, so.
In emergency response, you have to staff for the peak. I mean, otherwise you don't have an effective emergency response.
Well, we hope to just to put together a nice report like we did on the property tax exemption, and like we say, it just gives you more tools to help make decisions. And that's kind of the approach that we would like to take.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Mr. Dosky now?
I was really not gonna comment, but I'm just gonna
Oh,
have,
fine, you can't
This
resist.
is a fire
Yeah, well,
topic, you
I
have to
know.
comment.
I know a little too much, just enough to be dangerous. So just to back to Mr. Weddleton's comment, I think it was kind of, I don't think it was really, I think it was missed. Not that your comment was missed, that the impact of what he was saying was missed. He was asking about staffing hours, because in the fire service area, there's big discussion whether you should be at a 12-hour shift day, a 24-hour shift day. But I can tell you the trend nationally is there's big discussion about going to a 48-hour shift, actually. And then they have 96 hours off. I know within IAFF, they've had those conversations. Right now, they're a 24-hour shift schedule. And there's a lot of science and data behind why they're at 24 versus 12 hours, which some will advocate an 8 or 12-hour shift. I think from the data that I've seen, it actually increases the number of people that you need. But that's something to look at, is the hours
Okay.
and the data behind it. When it comes to the 4-packs that you're talking about, they're contractually obligated. So it's not in code, it's in the contract. So you have to look at the contract. And specifically, the contract is going to be your biggest impediment to going private if you so choose. But I would encourage you not just to look across the country how they do it, because there are large metropolitan areas that have private EMS. There's also other ways you can do it differently, where you can have basically roving EMS, where they're not actually housed in a station, but they are basically in their ambulance waiting for the next call. Because you're right, well over 85% of the calls are medical. So those are kind of the areas where I would send you to look, is those kinds of things, but also look at the model that is used out in the Matsu Borough, because they have paid responders for EMS, actually fire, and their upper echelon is actually full-time paid, but then they have extra auxiliary staffers that get paid per call. So not just how you're looking at other large metropolitan communities across the country, but look at within Alaska how some different of the bigger departments do it here in Alaska, because there are multiple models you can pick from. And the last thing I'll tell you about the 4-pack, it's consistent that I hear people go after a 4-pack. Every fire engine, every fire truck that is driven by an engineer. So the 4-pack is really a paramedic. That's what it is. Typically, it's that fourth person on the engine, because not every engine has advanced EMS, so every fireman is an EMT, every single one in Anchorage. But the paramedic is where you run into it. So, for example, in Chugiak Eagle River, we have a truck, an engine, and an ambulance, and we're supposed to staff it with 10 people in that entire station. But you have to remember their geographic location. It can take 30 minutes for anybody else to get there. So if you have a fire, they literally need to have enough people in that station to man the fire, because help isn't coming 3 minutes away like the rest of town. Mm-hmm. And so they do the same thing up at Station 10, which is in Mr. Weddleton's area. So when we're talking about 4-packs, it's not just who's the fourth person, because, for example, Eagle River, Medic 11 goes out on a call. Remember, there's an EMT, firefighter, who drives, and then there's a paramedic. They go out on one call. There's not another paramedic for, closest is Station 3 if they're there, or Station 6. So typically, Eagle River is supposed to staff that 4-man end, but that fourth man is a second paramedic, because they are so far away from anybody else who can help. So you have to, I would encourage the BAC to not only look at the specifics of the numbers, but look at the mission and the delivery of service, and the geographic location, because like I said, I've sat through these debates now for 4 years, and I remember one member from South Anchorage that was advocating getting rid of Tender 9. Well, what does Tender 9 do? Tender 9 is a water truck. There's no fire hydrants on the hillside. Probably a bad idea. So that's why I say it's not just about the numbers or where, you know, you have to look at the mission and try to understand delivery of service, but the contract will be a great thing that has to be part of that equation, because then you can see where the flexibility is.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson, appreciate it. Any other questions from assembly members? Okay, moving down the agenda. We're now down to the SAP report. Unfortunately, Alden's not here today. I was told last night he was going to be here today, so we're going to pick it up in June. But we do need to take a look at continuing our observer that we've got working on the contract. He's coming up in June, and since we've been told they're not going to bring SAP online until October, I think in June I want to talk to you, next meeting I want to talk to you guys about continuing that individual forward. So that he gives us a good watch on what's happening with SAP. I'm a little concerned about it.
I think he's given the administration some good ideas too,
I think so.
honestly.
Other comments from assembly members, anything? Audience participation, I don't see any audience here. That was fast participation.
Participated with the
They did
War
well.
amount. Anything anybody wants to bring up? Mike, one thing to you would be, Juno is working on a piece of legislation to allow the survivors of first responders to continue with the life insurance or their health insurance. Would you take a look at legislation, because I think they want to try and copy it here. I just want to know what the cost of that would be to the citizens of Anchorage if we adopt that. If we take what is some pool that they're looking at doing, you know, the cities would have to opt into. I just want to know what the cost would be. So when it comes in front of us, we have a realistic idea on there.
Okay.
Something, just to update everybody on the Seward Highway policing issue, which is a citywide issue, not just South Anchorage issue. The administration, maybe Suzanne, have been contacting legislators, particularly Jennifer Johnson, who's real sensitive to it, to see if there's any kind of funds that the state could provide to help us get a foothold in there. And the last we heard is Kathy Giesel through McKinnon got $200,000. I believe that actually passed and will come to the city that we can use for policing. And I think possibly some other amount has gone to the troopers, or I think it was the state of public safety. That might be used in addition. And part of their goal is to get Whittier and troopers in the city kind of saying, what are we going to do together? Here's a little bit of money to help. But $200,000 really doesn't do much. That does not give us patrolling on the highway at all. So we need some more money, and if it is to come from it, it has to be citywide fund some way. But we're working on it. I think we all need to be attentive to it, because the first accident there, where we can't open that highway after the MTs or whatever clean it up, there could be cars backed up to Seward. And I'll tell you, none of us will look good. We would have fallen down on our duty to cover this.
And it would be the state's fault.
Blame the state as government. You know, we're government.
Hold on that happy note.